Okay, there's Frank, Cecilia. Yeah, I don't hear you. Okay, I'll come back to you. Just put your hand up again because I took it down already. Kate Alvo.
Hey, Angelo. I have a question. You posted a video that I found really helpful about um, not jumping from one technique to the other.
Mhm.
So today, I don't know, I guess my question is, because you sort of gave us a few different approaches this morning, and I was wondering if it's better to kind of experiment with the different ones and see which one helps us drop into presence more easily and then stick with that, or should we uh, I don't know, use one different one per meditation session? Because I find my mind, like during one meditation session, is kind of jumping from one thing to the other, and
Okay.
I feel like I'm not going to get anywhere like that.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. So first of all, that's a bit of contextual suggestion. So if you are the type of person that really has trouble making decisions about that, and the thinking about what technique you want to use itself is a distraction, then that's really who that video was for. So that's just like an overarching statement about it. Specific to what you asked, I would suggest actually trying different things, but try one per round of meditation, for instance. So that way you don't have to think about anything during the meditation round. So before a round of meditations, say to yourself, I'm going to try X, Y, Z. Now, the exception to that is what you just described, where your attention might be all over the place, would be if you're actually practicing a sort of natural meditation or shikantaza, in which it's completely undirected. And that tends to be more challenging earlier on, and much more intuitively obvious what that even means later on. In fact, it tends to just click for people at some point where you realize what natural meditation actually is. And sometimes before that point, it's just like, well, what am I supposed to be doing? I'm just mind wandering, right? So if you find yourself like just mind wandering and kind of distracted, then natural meditation may not quite be there for you yet. And in that case, just pick one technique, and I would just do it for that round of meditation. And if it feels like you're getting a very good experience out of it, you're in deep samadhi, it's peaceful, you feel like something's really dropping in, then you can stay with that all day. It's really kind of something you have to figure out for yourself. But I would pick ahead of the round and then go with that.
So just to finish, thank you. So whichever one helps quiet the mind, basically, is the one I'm going for. Or
Mhm.
that's
Yeah, and sometimes you may have to try something for a couple different rounds to really give it a day in court. But as I said, yeah, don't switch up in the middle of a round, and just sort of make the decision ahead of time and then go for it. And the truth of it is, you can't really pick a wrong approach necessarily, even if during one round of meditation the mind is particularly active. Doesn't mean it's a failure. It just means that's what's happening during that round. So try things out a few different times and see. But again, I would just decide at the beginning of the round and then just stay with it.
great. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah, great question. Okay. Next we have Ella.
Hi, how, what do I do if I constantly just fall asleep?
Oh, okay. That's a great question. It's not uncommon. Um, so the first simple logistical thing to do about that would be try to pick a posture that is helpful for you to stay awake. So, like for instance, in Zen, it's very strongly encouraged to sit in a certain type of posture, an erect posture, an alert posture, and it's very strongly emphasized. I think, in my opinion, it's a bit overemphasized, but there is an important point to that, and that is, if you tend to just fall asleep when you're in a reclined position, a semi-reclined position, etc., then yeah, really focusing on posture can help you a lot. So first thing I would say is just try to pick a posture that's reasonably alert but not straining, not uncomfortable. do it with a light in the room. If you tend to do it in the dark, try it with the lights on. If you tend to meditate with your eyes closed, try with your eyes open just a little bit, like the sleepy Buddha eyes, where you can see just a couple feet in front of you. So your eyes aren't all the way closed, but they're not all the way open either. So those are the practical things I would recommend is, just try it again. Upright posture, light in the room, the eyes just a bit open. And that usually helps a lot over time. Now, you may be at a particular point in your life or your schedule where you're just really, really tired. And then it can be very challenging. Even with that posture, you can fall asleep for sure. So in that case, take a nap between rounds, even skip a round to take a nap if you just absolutely can't stay awake. And really that's about all you can do. Catch up on sleep. And also know that sometimes the mind really does use sleep to sort of avoid something. So you can probe around a little bit, like, what am I avoiding? Is there something I don't want to see here or don't want to feel here? That may not be the case at all, but on occasion it is. And other times, be alert for this, because other times you can actually be awake and you can be experiencing pure consciousness, but there's so little content or no content that the only interpretation the mind has is, I must have been asleep. But you weren't slumped over, you weren't asleep. So there are times when the brain or mind will just interpret it as, I was asleep, when you really weren't. So just be aware that that's also a possibility. So give those things a try and see how that helps.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Rick Stewart.
Hey, Angelo, how's it going?
Hey, good. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thanks for doing this again. It's amazing. All these people all over the world. Brilliant.
It's really cool.
You mentioned this morning when you're in a kind of enjoyable place with practice, as this kind of thoughts are coming and going and no problem. What's your suggestion to deepen? So there you are, relaxed. It's thoughts aren't really troubling you. Go into the sense fields, work a little bit with inquiry. What would you say?
Yeah. First of all, in that moment, if the thought of deepening comes, recognize that's a thought. You can even ask yourself if that's something you're concerned with. Can you pause your mic for a second? I think it's feedback, or I can do it.
There you go.
Okay, I'm just hearing myself. In the moment, you can actually ask yourself, what is deepening? How would I know if things are deeper, less deep? What is the reference point for that? For instance, if I'm making the judgment now, or I have the perception that things aren't as deep as they could be, what am I actually referencing? And just look right into your experience, like, okay, what is, so it can turn into a form of inquiry if the concern with deepening is somehow just almost distracting or overriding. Short of that, I would suggest, again, if you really get the vibe, and I think you probably do, of what I meant this morning when I talked about moving toward thought to the point where it gets so calm that there's essentially contentlessness. And if there is contentlessness, you can just rest there. There's nothing more to do, including being alert enough to see that even a thought that says, should I be doing anything more? Should there be more depth? Even that thought just beginning to stir, you're already aware of the energetic experience of that before it even fully forms. That kind of pure conscious alertness, perfectly fine. Just stay right there. There's not really a deepening to do in that space. Now, if you feel inclined to start to explore the senses, and you have to just develop your own attunement as to when that is, or whether you want to do what I just said with one round, to where it's just that contentless consciousness and your attention's right in that gate, but there's not even a knowing directly of that. It's just that pure space where the moment consciousness starts to stir as if it's going to form a thought, it's already nothing. It's already pure alertness. That can be one round, and the next round, explore the senses purposely. That's what I would recommend. And then I would do the senses, or you could even start for the first 5 minutes to lead yourself back to that very calm mind, calm thought space, then begin into one sense, just like we did this morning. And you can pick a sense, and I would stay with maybe one sense for a round and then try a different sense. Cool. Okay, we skipped over the first person, and I don't see their hand up. So anyway, if they want to put their hand up so we don't miss that. We have Mike Y.
Hey, Angelo. How you doing?
Hey, Mike. Good, thank you.
Good. Okay, so it's clear to me, it's been clear to me for many years that I'm not the doer. I can just see things happen, you know, the body just moves, you know, anything that appears, you know, any object, anything that's perceived, attention just moves, you know, that's very clear. The other day, I finally understood what the I thought was. Like Ramana Maharshi talks about the I thought. I don't know. Well, Ramana Maharshi talks a lot about the I thought. I never really understood it until the other day. What I saw was, I can't remember the situation, but I wanted to do something. And I saw that the I was just a thought.
Mhm.
And so, you know, that finally was clear. So having said all that, my hang up, so to speak, is, let me say one more thing, if I could.
Mhm.
Another practice that I've done for a long time, and I heard you mention it actually. I never heard anybody else talk about it, but it somehow came to me in the past, and that was just to let things come to me. You know, I would just let everything come to me.
Mhm.
And so in doing that, now it seems like that habit of letting everything come to me has kind of strengthened, you know, kind of an I sense of where everything comes to that I sense. And so now having said all that, my biggest hang up seems to be not being able to let the watcher or the noticer strengthen the I sense.
Yeah, I get exactly what you mean. So to start from the beginning of what you said, when you described sort of the experience of non-doership or everything just happening, what I sensed in the way you said it was that that you do have that insight, but you have the insight from the standpoint of almost someone watching it, like being a watcher essentially, or some
Yep.
sort of watching state, whether it's a personal you or not at all. But there's something sort of just watching things happen, watching things play out. And that's not a thing that's been added to you during this process. It's something that was underlying other layers of identity and processing that became laid bare. And that's how it is for everyone. So then the next thing you said, rightly so, it was like perfect timing, was you said, then I noticed that the I sense itself, it could only be a thought. Like there's the only possible thing it could be, right? Nisargadatta has a really good quote in a like an audio recording I heard once, which wasn't his voice. It was someone reading his stuff. But he said, if you regress properly, the I thought will go away, which is exactly right. But here's the thing. To even recognize what the I am sense is in the way you did takes a long time, because it's very easy to overlook. In fact, Adyashanti has said that there's something left in deeper stage realization that could be completely overlooked. It's a very thin thing. It's the most fundamental sense of self-reflection. And I don't know if he called it the I am sense there, but I would call that the I am sense. And it's not a personal belief about I, and it's not thoughts about me. It's a sense that can be completely overlooked, even with significant amounts of realization, with reasonably clear, almost non-dual realization even. So the fact that you recognize that, and that it itself is actually extra, the I sense is not fundamentally true, that it could only be a thought, and yet it has a certain effect is important. So then the next thing you said, which was great, is that you start to wonder, okay, is that the watcher state? Is it setting up a watcher state? And how, from this fundamental sense of a watcher state, or a watching, or a consciousness of, or a self-consciousness, how can that eliminate that sense of I itself? And what's really important to know about this is it doesn't do it directly. It does it through other insights, or it does it through other perceptual filters falling away. So specifically, the one that tends to stick around the longest and have the most meat to it would be reactivity. And so that's something to look at. It came across my mind to ask you that when you first started talking, is, and you don't have to answer it now, but something to look at is, you might feel like things just happen, things just play out. But what happens when there's emotional triggering? What happens in relationships or work, or those things that really trigger us? Look there to see if there's still reactivity at all, to where suddenly you don't feel so much like a watcher. You feel like, I have to do something about this. I have to make a decision. I have to react. Not that you think there's anyone doing that either. It's a physical experience. If that's happening, then some equanimity work will help calm that. But ultimately, what that does is it leads into investigating the dualistic nature of experience itself, which has a very different quality to the investigation. And that's where you're at. So that's what I would recommend. And what it takes is a very discerning type of investigation. So as we were talking about this morning, like in sound, there's just sound. I'm sure you can experience that pretty clearly. But in the way I would look into this for you, not even during meditation, like when you're not meditating, would be to actually look into your visual experience and look at an object, find an object, and see if that appears to be over there. If it does appear to be over there in any way at all, if the non-dual nature of that is not completely clear, then ask yourself, well, what is it that's extra in this experience? At what point am I referencing back to a thought of any kind, even a subtle thought, to tell me that that's over there and there's something over here aware of it, or even something everywhere that's aware of it? When does that happen? At what point?
That is that I sense. I mean, it's the
It
I
is.
sense watcher.
Absolutely.
That's, it's kind of like there's an I sense and then there's the perception, but it's like the same thing, kind of
Mhm.
creating a distance, a space that's kind of strengthening that I sense.
That's
But
right.
it's like that watcher. And if I understand you right, if my question is more succinctly just how do I get rid of the watcher,
Mhm.
If I understood you right, it's just to try to find anywhere else, just to notice anywhere else where an I sense is, like you're saying, the reactor. Like, am I a reactor? Is that the I sense?
It's what you're, it's actually first just noticing when attention bounces back into the thought, because as you said, the I sense is only a thought. The fact that you know that is really important, because if you didn't know that, you wouldn't be able to do what I'm saying, really, unless you just lucked out somehow. And what I'm saying is, like, say, like when I'm looking at you, I see your face, or I see a lamp over there. So I see a lamp behind you. If I'm looking at that lamp, I could ask myself, at what point does that become a lamp seen by me?
It's in the green. Green
Hold on, I'm gonna
Yeah.
mute yourself if you're not talking. Okay, cool. So at what point does that become an object to me, the subject? You don't have to say it in those words, but at what point does that something get added to that, where it's not simply what I'm seeing or what is seen? When so the visual experience itself has a primary nature to it. Absolutely. And what you could say is, you could pour your attention into that right now, like into a visual experience. And there's nothing there that suggests I, me, watcher, watched, aware, perception. None of that's actually there, right? But it will start to feel like it's there unless you're experiencing very clear non-dual. And if you were, you wouldn't be asking the question. It's not something that reverses once it's there, once it's clear. So the moment it feels like it's there, you're probably already bouncing back into thought, like you're coming back to yourself to confirm that that's out there. It's a very subtle thought. This isn't like gross thought. It's not like literally structured conceptual thought. It's kind of non-conceptual thought. But by doing what I'm saying is what you do is you sort of peel that layer away from it. And it's a very subtle thing, but it makes a huge difference in perceptual experience. So that's what I would work on. Very simple, nothing complicated here, but just see how long your attention can remain with that visual experience before it becomes an object, before you become a you, before there's a watcher. And if any of those things start to happen experientially, ask yourself, how did they happen? Where did they come from? What am I referencing right now? Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. And this can take some time, by the way, but it can also shift in a very big way and surprise you. So the visual field is really the key to all of this. So if it's too rigid feeling in the visual field, which it is for people often, because our mind, our brain processes a lot to make things seem three-dimensional, then start in the auditory field and see how the auditory field really doesn't give you information about location nearly like the visual field does. And you could try it in the sensations, the body sensations, and then just reapply that practice to a visual experience. That's what I would recommend for you. And during meditation, you can do something like this, but you don't have to. You can do anything you want. But when you're not meditating, your actually eyes are open. You can do this inquire. You don't have to be in deep samadhi to do this. Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks,
really
Will.
cool. Yeah.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Okay, we got Sam.
I
love
think
it.
Frank's ready too, as well.
Oh, well, let's get Frank before. Okay, we got Frank. Okay.
Is my audio working this time?
Yep.
All right, cool. It turns out that my questions are related to what those questions were, but they're phrased differently and they're more about abiding. I guess it starts off with, tell me what your next thought's going to be.
Mhm.
That gets down to a whole bunch of stuff. Is Maya believing the stories that thoughts tell me I believe?
Yes.
Fuck.
I mean, that's a really great definition. Yeah.
And so that would include thoughts that tell me I'm thinking my way through this right now. That the whole bottom drops out once
It
you see
totally
that.
does drop out. And that's if I could say what the key insight to that first shift true Kensho is, it's realizing, and I can say this, and I've said it a million times, but hearing it and even believing it doesn't help. You have to really realize it, that what you take yourself to be at any given moment is only a thought. That itself is a thought. And that it does it like, it's like a scaffolding and it just drops out.
Mhm.
But the fact that you're thinking about this, the fact that you're poking around at this is great. This is how you do it. You go in there and you just watch those thoughts come. And as they come, it's like, okay, what is it just became aware of a thought? That can only be another thought. And it's just like that until things just get really, so either one of two things will happen. Sometimes the bottom just drops out and you'll feel, it'll feel like an emotional experience, like almost a fear response or
Mhm.
going into a void. People have said this all kinds of ways. Don't look for any of that, but it can be any of that. But it's not always. Sometimes it's just everything gets exquisitely quiet in a way that's not it's not even a producible quiet. It's like a primordial quiet, something else like that. So just keep at it and don't push, don't struggle with it. Just have a discerning attention and a curiosity and just keep picking at it. That's what I would recommend.
Okay. And so, well, yeah, I guess that is it. Because it's the question is about abiding, but it's really just sit with it. That's all you do. It'll start abiding by itself.
Absolutely. Abiding abides.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
The other question is related. I noticed the screen. It's always there. I only notice it when it occurs to me to look. Is there like a trick to remember to stop forgetting? Like, how
Well,
do people keep reminding themselves to look?
Yeah, you don't want to force yourself to do that because what it ends up turning into is a sort of self-judgment of like, why am I not doing that all the time? And
Oh yeah.
nothing happens all the time. Like it's just for anyone. It doesn't matter how awake or it doesn't matter. Nothing happens all the time. Nothing stays. There's nothing permanent. There's no permanent noticing of the screen of consciousness. So the key would be opening yourself to the possibility that at any moment that can just become obvious to you. And letting it just open again and again and again. It can come in like microseconds. It's fine. The moment you recognize it, you feel into it, it's just that the screen, just consciousness. And that's it. Don't try to hold on to it either, because holding on to it is a thought. Oh, I got to maintain this.
Oh, yeah.
That's just a
It's
thought. There's no one to
grasping.
maintain it. Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah. That no one to maintain it. The lack of subject is very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also the thing I'll also caution you on, and is why I really point people to move toward thought. Also to when you disidentify and go, oh, that's another thought, but become curious. Well, what is the substance of thought in the first place? What is this space I'm in that's aware of thought? Meaning, don't get too disassociated with it either. You know, if we have a tendency towards self-abandonment, then we sometimes have a tendency towards self-dissociation, and
Mhm.
that's not necessary. So, you know, again, don't ever judge yourself for any of this. The fact that you're taking this one moment to inquire, the fact that you're opening this one moment to something just slightly more clear, deeper, whatever it is, more primary, it's a surrender. It's just a moment of surrender. And how this whole process unfolds is through those little moments of surrender, those little willingness moments.
All right. I'm familiar
Yeah.
with them. This has
Yeah.
clarified a whole
Yeah.
bunch for me. Thank you very
Yeah.
much, man.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's nice seeing you. Okay, we got Sam.
Okay. Thanks everyone for your questions. It's really triggering a lot for me. It's coming out. It's good. I wanted to ask something about what Mike said. I think maybe it would be helpful for other people too. The sense of, he was talking about the I thought, that's like more of like a I am kind of thought, like consciousness, right? Okay. I guess what I wanted to hear you talk about would be this sort of sense of, like yesterday, like, and I've messaged you about this before about, you know, just women and girls in my life, but right now I'm in Monterey. I'm staying with my mom, visiting her, and I've been noticing stuff that I never noticed before, like she'll like she'll say something, it could be totally minor, and then like I feel maybe like some slight sense of danger or rejection, and then I notice like my body is like looks over at her to make sure she's still there, like, and this is kind of interpretation, right? But it's like to make sure she still loves me, to make sure I'm still safe, and I like notice my body wanting to do that. And then whereas before I would probably I'd feel that at the core but not be aware of it, and it would be like I'd exert so many layers of control over it that I wouldn't notice, or maybe I'd cover it up with anger or like a joke or something like that. Now it's just there, and so it's very I feel very naked in a lot of these situations now. And so I guess my question is like this nakedness that I feel like a kid a lot of the times. Like I remember being scared of crowds, and then once I turned 20, I was not scared anymore. But now it's like all coming back. Like I'm scared around people. Like I just feel like a wide-eyed kid. And so it's weird because it's like back, it's like, isn't that the reason that like separation formed? Because it's so vulnerable that you're like, oh, these thoughts will protect me.
Yeah.
But like now it's back to that. So it's like, well then what? I don't know.
I know what you mean.
Yeah.
This happens, I think, to everyone, that as we start to peel away layers, what we're peeling away often is coping mechanisms, but they're not coping mechanisms based in let's say like natural identity. They're coping mechanisms based in a sort of avoidant identity, which the mind identified world is as I've said recently, it's a sort of stable dissociated state. Yeah. Right. So we use that, as we're identified with that, we use that to build these layers of slightly dissociated avoidant coping mechanisms, because they work, and they kind of do work in a certain way, right? We get social currency sometimes from acting like we're more confident than we are, and all these sorts, without going into all these details about social dynamics and stuff, but it's rewarded actually, and it does work in certain settings. Even being emotionally violent can work for you, depending on if you're where you're at, and if you're a politician and those sorts of things, right? I'm not saying any of this is right. I'm just saying these coping mechanisms we develop can also be rewarded, and so we can develop personas and personalities that interact with other personas and personalities based on this stuff. Now, when you do the courageous thing and you do what you're doing and you do what we're all doing, and you let these identities fall away, you in one sense, you lose some power, right? You lose some of that power in the social matrix, and you feel it, even if you're not interacting with other people, because you have access to consciousness, and we all have access to that same consciousness. You can feel the disarming happening, right? You feel you become more, like I said, porous, more innocent. But it's also a movement to the feminine aspect, which is beautiful. It's the feminine aspect is very, very powerful, but it's very vulnerable as well, right? So when we are moving in this way, in this direction, you're just really learning a whole new way to live. Like I can't understate that. It's true. All of this whole process is learning a whole new way to live. And learning the power of that vulnerability and that unguardedness, which is awesome. And since we have so many people, I won't go through a long inquiry with you about this, but I can tell you right away when you started talking, the inquiry that came to me that you could investigate with yourself very simply would be, to just sit, calm your mind, calm your body for a few moments, and then intone the statement, I am unloved. What does that feel like? What does that bring you? What are the fears that come up around that? And this is intense for anyone. So I'm unloved, I'm unlovable. It doesn't mean you're making that true, and you're not, we're not talking about like law of attraction where you're turning your life into that. You're just actually exploring the fear that you already recognized can run you. Now, why would anyone do something as crazy as what we're talking about? For anyone else listening, why would you actually sit there and say to yourself, I'm unloved? Here's why. And it's important to understand there's a reason to do it this way. And there's a reason to do it, because what happens is you take it into your own responsibility. Then if you're always reacting to that fear around whatever, people you might be in a relationship with, people you are in a relationship with, people you have very long histories with, then that reactivity that just automatically happens can happen so quickly that we're not able to actually unpack what all our beliefs and fears are around it. But if you take it into a space where it's actually just you, two things. One is you prove to yourself that you actually have the capacity to feel these things, these fears. Everyone has the fears of abandonment. And these are deeply rooted fears, as we all know. Fears of abandonment, fears of being unloved. But if you can explore those on your own and show yourself, wow, I actually have the capacity to spend a moment feeling that I may be unloved, I may be unlovable, what does that mean to me? What would that mean to me? All I can tell you is people who have walked this path have come to these exact places with these exact questions, very, very similar to this, that have been huge breakthroughs for them. Huge, huge, huge breakthroughs in the non-dual spectrum, in the anatta spectrum. So just know that as challenging as that might be, as strange as it might be to do that, it can be a very, very valuable process to go through, and take it little by little. You don't have to do it all at once, just touch into these things. Gangaji has a great video somewhere about doing this. And she said, and I think rightly so, what in her opinion keeps people from these deeper stages of realization often is this deep emotional work. They just won't do it, or they don't even know to do it. And she led people like one after another right through this, going all the way to the bottom of I'm unlovable. I'm sad. Why are you sad? Well, because I'm afraid that I'm not loved, and that I'm completely unlovable, and all the way at the bottom that I'm nothing at all. Yeah. And so there are a lot of emotional barriers to these deeper identity structures, and coming in contact with them again and again with the intention to just see what's actually there, feel what's actually there. It naturally unhooks the beliefs from it, the reactivity from it. And you might be surprised what you find.
Do you think, I just want to ask a quick question. Do you think this kind of approach, I find that when I'm talking about this kind of approach, not that I'm trying to like convert everyone, I mean, sometimes, but when I talk about this kind of approach, a lot of people are very receptive towards it, and it rings true to them. People who are close to me. Do you think this kind of thing is pretty much also an awakening process, shedding these layers of identity? Do you think it takes you to that edge as well? And if so, then why is it that it's so underemphasized? It's mostly inquiry and meditation and sort of what I would maybe describe as more masculine type practices.
You need both, I think. I have a quote in my book by my teacher, and I've quoted it many times, but it's right on the money. And he essentially said, this at some point becomes much more about compassion. this realization stuff. He was he's a Zen master. So he's speaking in the context of Zen, but he said ultimately it doesn't really end up being about awakening or enlightenment. It's about love. It's about living out of the innermost promptings of your heart. He said, but, and he meant it, without realization, without awakening, without Kensho, without insight, you will think you're acting out of the innermost promptings of your heart, and you'll be acting out of the outermost promptings of your deluded ego. And that's what we get. That's what we see when we get situations like toxic positivity, passive aggressiveness, people who genuinely think they're doing the right thing in life and they're wreaking havoc. Really, we can get ourselves into some very, very strange places through belief and through emotional repression. So you need both, in my opinion. You can't overlook either side of it, or weird things happen. So again, middle way, right? The middle way. Yeah.
Thank
you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Next is Megan.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff, that emotional stuff. Hi. My question's around inquiry, really. I have been doing the Who Am I for a few years, I guess. I'm mainly Ramana Maharishi. It's been my inspiration. So I'm so grateful to have found your book and your videos, because to me, it's much more clear to help me get through these areas where I got blocked, where I'm stalled. And so I feel my inquiry question, I guess, is I'm sitting there, it's a subject-object situation. And meditation or driving the car or whatever it might be. Sometimes there can be incredible fluidity. It's just this poetry in motion. It's delicious, it's delightful, but there's a physical aspect more than a sort of external one, where I'm still looking behind my eyes. I can see my nose ridge, and this is a limitation to me. And also the feeling of being on the seat or my mat or the car. And this can bring me back from this fluidity where the separation of object, subject comes back.
Yes.
Because of these two very physical
experiences.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if you've got any advice on.
Sure. Yeah. So I'll just delineate this for anyone watching and for you specifically, but that the approach up until an initial awakening and the approaches after, especially when we talk about non-duality, what my terminology for non-duality is the experience of physical separation, boundaries, subject object experience, all of that. They're kind of two different approaches in a sense, and the non-dual comes later. But with that said, this process is so different for everyone, and whatever feels interesting to you, whatever feels relevant for you to investigate, you should investigate it. With all that said, when you talked about the subject object construct, when we are approaching first awakening, when especially if you're using something like a one-pointed approach or Mu, or even who am I, to the point where it just becomes who.
Yes.
And it's just a question. Now you don't even need to ask the question. It's just a question. It's just there. Usually the advice is you kind of shut the sense gates, meaning you don't need to worry about sound sensations when you're meditating. Now, when you're driving, totally different. I wouldn't recommend doing this when you're driving necessarily, not this intense one-pointed stuff, but you may be able to carry it with you throughout the day, the sense of it. But the mind will still be chattering on, and there's sounds and sensations, and that's fine. When you're sitting with this, though, when you have quietude, like meditation, when you're going off to sleep at night, the moment you wake up, there's nothing else to do, nothing else to distract yourself with. And it just comes back to who. It's not so much that we're trying to dissolve the subject object construct. It actually becomes something like pure subjectivity. And that's why many people call it the I am sense, or even the realization of I am when the shift occurs, because it feels like, doesn't just feel like, it is pure subjectivity, is pure I. To be able to just reside. The first question we had was about this I am sense. And it's a very strange thing, because some people recognize it far earlier. Other people notice it later as it's dropping away, or as it's kind of dissolving, which is later in realization. But when you're working directly with self-inquiry, one-pointed approach, what is Mu? Who am I? Where am I? Until it gets very quiet. Then at that point, it's kind of like, let's shut the sense gates. I'm not in any way like a scholar in Hinduism, but I know the Bhagavad Gita begins where the 5 horses are drawn in. And so the 5 horses being the 5 sense gates, it's like, and even in the Bible, there's mention of this by Christ. It's like, close those sense gates and pull attention back into the sense of I, investigate it directly into the sense of subjectivity. And it becomes this pure subjectivity. And I was pointing to this in the first talk today. And that's one other approach is through thought. You can do this through thought as well, until the mind gets very, very, very quiet. But it's not so much a drifting experience. It's not a mind wandering experience. It's quite alert, actually. It's a sweet spot between alertness and contentlessness. That's where the magic happens. And when you have achieved, like I can tell by the look on your face, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When this is occurring, when this is there, then notice usually what catches people at this point or keeps them re-identifying subtly are subtle thoughts. And there are a couple of things. One is, well, what do I do about sounds or sensations? In that moment, even the noticing of a sensation is itself a thought. The noticing of a sensation is a thought. At this stage of things, it is. It's a label essentially. So if the mind says, "Oh, well, now there's a sensation in the leg," oh, okay, well, there's one more thought, and it should bring you right back into that consciousness, into that query, the question, the fundamental koan, which is quiet. If there's even a mental image of the face, the nose, the body, that's also a thought. And recognize one more thought. Where am I? Who am I? Or as Ramana said, for whom did that thought arise? To whom did that thought arise? And just back into the quiet. The other types of thoughts that catch people here often are practice-based thoughts. Like these little subtle doubts, like, am I doing this right? I'm not sure. Or this one, here I am again, every time I get this far and then I can't get farther, something happens, right? It's when we don't see overtly that that's just another thought, that it tends to be a little bit of a barrier. It's kind of like this subtle thought that we're just kind of holding on to, but the stream is trying to go over the waterfall, that kind of a thing. So that's what I would recommend. Those things to look at is what I would recommend. And while you're driving, if you can keep some sense into that I am sense, that's great. But even you can also explore the senses too. Sometimes attention just wants to move into the sound field, into the body. But when we're talking about pure self-inquiry, quiet, eyes closed, meditating, you're really closing the sense gates. It's pure subjectivity. Cool? Yeah. All right. And we have Nancy next. Yeah. Nancy. Okay, well, Nancy, I'm not hearing you. So try either unmute or maybe we can also move on and then re-raise your hand once you have the sound working. So we'll skip for now. We'll go to Maxine.
Hi, Angela.
Hello.
This question I have is I hope it's not too repetitive because it's a lot like all the other questions now.
Oh, it's always new when I hear it.
I'm sorry?
It's always new when I hear it. This moment's never happened
really?
before.
Oh, good. That's great. Okay, so when normally I'm very tense and reactive. That's my normal life. And then I feel that I can't get control over it. But when I sit down to meditate, and I do some meditation before the self-inquiry in order to, relax my body and everything and relax my mind. And then by that point, it's like, well, the self-inquiry it's just too much. Is it really necessary? It just seems like a lot of work right now. I kind of want to relax. And so maybe I should do the self-inquiry when I'm tense.
Oh, I don't think you should do self-inquiry unless you really feel moved to do it. If the question doesn't make sense to you, or it doesn't feel like you're actually curious, it probably won't work. So, I don't know if you've read my book, but like I have I think an inquiry chapter where I talk about how to explore, like, well, what am I really curious about? What am I really trying to accomplish? If it's about suffering and so forth, so be it. The question, what is suffering, is perfectly acceptable if that's something you're curious about. And you don't even have to ask that question during meditation. If you have the ability, and many people do have the ability during meditation to just drop into a very, very peaceful, contentless state, then so be it. You don't have to do anything with that. You can inquire outside of meditation anytime, any place you want. It can be a separate practice too. But I would encourage you to find a question that actually matters to you, that sounds interesting. Like, who am I would have not been an interesting question to me before awakening. It just wouldn't have, for various reasons, but doesn't mean it's not for other people. It's very valuable to some people. Some people think it doesn't make sense and they want to ask, where am I? That makes sense to them. So it really is individual. And all of these ways of talking about self-inquiry and, what is Mu? It's the most common koan given in Renzai Zen to practitioners by far. It's the first koan, and the answer to that koan is enlightenment, right? It's well, not full enlightenment, but it's kensho. It's an awakening. That is the only answer to that koan. So it's a very powerful koan, but it makes zero sense to some people, to most people.
Yeah.
So
I don't get it.
right. But it made perfect sense to me because it's the one thing I don't have to think about. Everything else I could think about. I can't think about that. So anyway, again, it's a lot of this is personal, and it depends on what matters to you. So what I really try to encourage people to get to is a place of authenticity about everything. What is most important to you? Is that, the first thing you mentioned to me was reactivity and sort of struggle or stress or internal struggle, it sounds like. And that's probably what you want to address. It would be what I would want to address. It was what I did want to address. So yeah, if you can meditate and have respite from that, wonderful. That's grace. It's beautiful. If you want to inquire into that, you can take, what I would recommend is taking a very simple approach, like once a day, just kind of reflect on the day and say, okay, what was the most triggering thing for me today? What was the one thing, if I could reduce it to a very simple experience, meaning maybe I heard so-and-so say this, or I watched the news and that politician did that, whatever it was. If you can reduce it to like the moment you actually felt a trigger start, that's helpful. And then say, okay, well, so that was my trigger that I'm going to work on today. I'm going to give myself permission to just forgive myself for all other triggers, all other reactivity today. Doesn't matter. But this one thing I just want to address, and I'm going to sit with it. And you can do this while you're laying down in bed. You can do it after meditation. You can do it during meditation if you want. But when you're calm and relaxed and you're in a place where you feel safe, in your house, wherever it is you feel safe, that's a good time to investigate that particular trigger. And you can just ask yourself a very simple question. What am I not accepting about this? Because it's always something about acceptance. We don't want to fully acknowledge the truth of something. It may just be that so-and-so is a selfish person, and that so-and-so could be someone in my life. And they an objective witness would say they're probably pretty selfish and don't treat people right. That I'm not okay with. That I struggle against, right? That could be it. It could be, that's what I'm reacting to. I'm reacting to that so-and-so did this thing that I think is reasonably interpretable as selfish. And I'm not okay with that, right? Then you can look into that and say, well, where's the not okay part? What is the cost to me when I'm not okay? I mean, it happened whether I like it or not. That did happen. That person said this and that, right? That's what happened. But do I have to react to it? Or could I react to it a little less next time? Right now, as I relive it, or I think about that situation in my safe space, where's the reaction forming? What is it made out of? Where is it in my body? Is it partially thought? Is it all thought? Is it a physical sensation? And you don't have to come up with some big answer. It's just a matter of exploring this. The exploration of this at a slower pace, when you can actually feel the parts of it, the sensations, the emotions involved, the beliefs about the emotions, like I can't handle this. It starts to just kind of loosen up, and then it'll disentangle itself. And you might be really surprised when in that same situation, after doing this a few times or several times, you don't feel triggered anymore. And it'll be like, whoa, That's weird. It just unhooks itself. It really does work. But if you feel a lot of reactivity a lot of the time, then take baby steps with it. Pick one specific area and just work with that maybe once a day or something. So that's what I would suggest.
Oh, good. Thank you. And if I do that, do you think, can that get me into the non-dual state?
Oh, for sure. Over time. Yeah. Without addressing reactivity specifically, without addressing reactivity, it's damn near impossible to fully realize non-dual. In fact, I would say it is. You can have experiences of non-dual, and you might even come in and out of it, and you might really experientially know what it is because you've been there. And you may even have an ongoing experience of some aspects of non-duality, but clear, formless, non-dual, where there's just, there can't be reactivity there. There won't be reactivity there. So reactivity is a very solid part of what feels like us. Even if you've seen through self and you're like, I know there's no self because I can't find one and I'm sure of it, yet I sure feel like there's a lot of selfing going on. There's a lot of feeling of something trying to defend itself, even if I know it's not me. That's the reactivity. So the bulk of what prevents us from experiencing non-dual realization naturally, because it is natural, it is that way. It actually is that way. So it's usually reactivity.
Wow, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Angela.
You're welcome. Okay, who do we got? Petrosor. I apologize if I said that wrong.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I can.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. It's amazing. I found you because I look on the Buddha, the gas pump. So there I have found you, and I'm happy that I'm here in this online retreat.
How do you say your name?
Petrosor. Petrosor or Petrizor. Okay, thank you. Yes, so in fact, I want to get more clarification on the difference between the I amness and the presence. And I'm using the terminology, the I amness in the sense of Nisargadatta Maharaj, and the presence in the sense of Eckhart Tolle. I think that you are in the supreme state, basically that you are present and you do not have kind of a center in your body. Basically, your center is all over the place for whatever enters in your field, in a sense field, there you are basically instantaneously. While we have this feeling of I-amness, which situates in more or less in the body. And even in my case, when I have no thought, so there's a gap between thoughts, even in that case, I still feel the energetical center in my body, which is located where Ramana Maharshi said, in the chest on the right side of the body, close to the heart chakra, almost symmetric from the heart, the physical heart. So I can keep it for minutes, maybe, I don't know, maybe a little bit longer, but then thoughts will come and I will be lost. So I think that I'm reasonably well in I-amness, and I kind of understand I-amness, and I can feel the I-amness energetically in my body. This is something I understand. On the other side, recently I also experienced the presence in the sense of Eckhart Tolle. And in this feeling of presence, I'm more like outside the body. So there's no focus on the body almost at all. And there is an awareness of what's going on around me. And if like everything in a milliseconds that enter into this presence, it's felt immediately. And there's also no thought, but then the thought also came, there's nothing stable here. So indeed, there's a variation, and often thoughts come quite quickly after that. So so between those states, the I-amness and the presence, what can you clarify a little bit more that I understand why one is really focalized on the body and feels energetic and on the body, and the other practically I'm outside the body. It's like almost I have no connection with the, of course, if I hurt my leg or something happened, or I feel, I don't know, if I put my hand on something very hot, I will, of course, the body will react. But still, it's like something wants to see everything that appears in the very moment, in the milliseconds, is that wants to be there. If I want to wake up in the morning to feel this, to have this presence, that I let this come in, that wants to take everything, the whole reality in, and it's also a need to go into this presence. I would say I have to go into this presence. Like I really want to do that, but I do not. Presence is recent for me. Something I did for several years, but presence is like few weeks or 1 month, something like that. So I'm a little bit like I try to understand this opportunity for me. And sorry to make it so long. Yes, I will stop here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Yeah. So what you're so first of all, I'll just talk about terminology, that people use terminology very differently. And I can't really speak for other teachers necessarily. This is just background, then I'll answer more specifically. When I use the word presence, it really depends on the context. I actually have a video called, I think it's called What is Presence? But I describe how our experience of presence actually evolves through the process. So in one sense, I could say, you know, the sort of consciousness presence as I am sense from what you're describing. And then what you're starting to taste now is what I would call non-dual presence. That it's probably non-dual. It sounds like it is. Now, the thing to understand about that, though, is that it's still experiential. And when it's a realization, a non-dual realization, it's not that it's different, but there's a fundamental aspect to it that's just not there with the experience, that is there with the realization. And also it's ongoing. It's not like it doesn't come and go. So I think what you're describing as presence is actually non-dual, where there's no sense of a center. It's like, to even say I'm out there, I'm everywhere, doesn't really make sense anymore. Because what does I even mean when there's no referencing of really space is what it is. You're not referencing dimension anymore. You're not referencing center other. It could also be that a specific aspect of the dualistic experience is falling away for you, which is the subject object experience. But often what that feels like is the sense that you're the special center of everything, and everything out there is somehow relegated to some distance or somewhere in the spectrum of how important it is in reference to you. That kind of collapses, and it's like, oh, well, that's just as important and just as me as that is me, as that is me, as this is me. That's when the subject object experience drops away. But the just total formless, deeply sort of peaceful, ill-descript presence you're talking about is probably non-dual presence, is what you're starting to experience, which is great. And the thing I was going to say is, when there's thoughts that sort of break that up, as you mentioned a couple times, that it tends to turn into a bunch of thoughts. That's okay. That happens, and that's typical. It doesn't usually just go from 0 to 100 kilometers per hour, where it's like full on out of nothing. It tends to kind of come and go for a while, or it feels like you're going into and exiting something, or the I am sense and center is kind of coming and going and fluctuating. And then it's just obviously, oh, it couldn't be other than this. How could it ever be other than this? It has never been other than this for me, for anyone ever at all. That clear. That's the realization of non-duality, formlessness, or there not being space in the way the mind imagines it. So as far as practice advice, I think you're doing what it's already progressing. So doing what you're doing is great. I still would recommend spending some time in that pure I am sense, because you have access to it, and it does sort of passively calm the fluctuations in mind that cause the polarity that tends to pull us back into thought. When we feel those thoughts, right, it's a polarity thing, because in reality, for non-dual presence we're talking about, there's no polarity. Polarity doesn't make sense anymore. There's no self other, there's no high, low, backward, forward, inside, outside, before and after. It's all intermixed with itself in a sense. So the polarities are up here, they're up in consciousness. So having some practice still where you spend time just calming that mind, can be helpful. And then looking, as I was saying to a previous questioner, looking for any subtle triggers that might still be around, anything that's triggering the mind, that makes it feel like you have to run back to safety. Why are you running back to safety? What feels unsafe? Questions like that can be helpful. Where do I feel unsafe? Where do I feel like I might be missing something if I let go too much? These kinds of questions that can probe a little bit to see where is it that I'm holding on. That can help calm that tendency to pull back. But also, as a couple questioners ago, the gentleman in the living room with the lamp behind him, we were doing specific non-dual investigations. You can work with those as well, for sure. Just as I was talking about with visual objects, start to look into at what point, what's the early sign that attention's being pulled back into thoughts. There's the subtle thoughts or the subtle overlay, which makes there appear to be distance, subject, object, space, then the gross thoughts. So see if you can start to discern when attention is getting pulled back into the mind or the sense of being a subject, because that will always be extra because there's no subject, because you've experienced how there's no subject. Yeah. So I would recommend those couple things. And trust your instincts. You sound like you're progressing nicely. So
Yes, thank you. I would like to add that I like the way you look, your eyes. Your eyes are kind of illuminated.
Oh,
yeah.
It might be having something to do with the Zoom, to be honest. But yes, I've noticed they look a little different here for some reason. I don't know why, but anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Nice to meet you. Okay, Bob Gates.
Okay.
Wow. I love it. That's great.
That's why I have to overcome my years of being a professor. That's my shadow. Thank you for being here and for taking my question and for your book and for your many other things you've done. I saw the wonderful video presentation you did for the POK group a couple weeks ago, a month ago.
Oh, great.
So I'm really trying to boil this down and make it relatively short. I think that the overview of the question is, I am stuck in a routine of deconditioning that feels on the one hand absolutely wonderful and absolutely horrible. So many years ago, I had kind of a brief awakening feeling, just an experience of bliss and melting. I began meditating for many years. I did a Vipassana type meditation and followed religiously the notion that if a thought arises, come back to your breath. And then thoughts arose that I couldn't go back to my breath with because they seemed so insightful and important, and often they seemed like a voice talking to me. So I started writing down, and I'll give you some, and they were just wonderful. So there was always only one thing to do. All reasons are rationalizations. You can't love anyone until you can love anyone. The unexpected always happens. You can't give from an empty bowl. An enlightened person doesn't need a to-do list. Using the mind to try to become enlightened is like using a chainsaw to catch a fish. Hundreds of them. And so they were very good. They gave me this field of insight. I was happy at some point to read Adyashanti talking about aha moments in meditation and finding those to be valuable and useful, and that was great. My process has accelerated in the past year and become what I was happy to hear you talk about, natural meditation, where I absolutely think of it as an inquiry practice without a question. Mm-hmm. So I have tried who am I and so forth, but it's like, I know there is something that needs to be known, often around something that is a problem or difficulty or anxiety or stuckness or, something that's bothering me and so forth. And so every morning in my meditation, I will sit, thoughts came up, worries, anxieties, this, usual mind chatter. And I just sit, and from the years of meditation, I can relax and sink in. And when I sink in, there's an openness and a presence and an awareness. And in that, thoughts arise. Now they are a little more personal and individual and seem more closely related to the problem that I'm feeling, as opposed to these more general, abstract, universal statements that I was getting. And so now things like, the only way I can help someone else who's suffering is to not make things worse. I'm a person who loves to be right. There are no bad outcomes. I am not in control. Since I can change what is, perhaps I'd be better off changing the way I think things should be. The narrative of the person I was worried about is you are hurting me, but that's their narrative. So these seem more to be resolving issues that have more of a personal quality to them, kind of conditioning issues. So my process is every morning I have one of these, and I'm in bliss. My body melts. I feel this just release. And then I write these things down in my journal because that seems the appropriate thing to do. I'm still fighting the thought that maybe I shouldn't be writing things down and thinking about things. But the things I'm writing down seem to be the kinds of things that you and other teachers say, as if I'm learning something, even though I know the awakening is a non-learning or unlearning. So that's where I'm stuck. Is that clear enough?
I'll just give you my instinct as I was listening to the whole thing.
Yeah.
My own instinct is to go past all of that. That's my instinct, is to like let go of all of those layers, because there are brilliant layers of identity.
Yeah.
Look at what humans do. Look at the literature humans write. Look at the philosophy they write. Look at the things artists create. All that's fine. It's wonderful. It's all layers of consciousness. It's amazing states of consciousness we can access. But what I'm talking about is a kind of death. It's radical. And to be honest, it's going to a place that you cannot know. And so that's my instinct with you, is to like, if you really want to know that I'll say it this way. If you really want to know my answer to you on a personal level, there's something deeper, and you sense it now.
I know that, and I feel like I'm coming closer to it, and I feel like each of these moments is a small death. But but my instinct is to continue to follow this path of these things until they run out. But I'm worried that I'm an old guy, that might take more than I have.
Are they running out yet?
No.
Okay.
No. And they seem more, I mean, the recent ones are about really a flowering of love and a non-judgment and I'm okay, and I'm just here. And they're very powerful realizations. But then during the day, they're gone and I'm back to my reality, and then something else will come up and that has to be resolved. So it's like, the never ending barrel of conditions.
Yeah. So I'll give you two things. One, and they're a little bit divergent. One is what I feel is frustration when we're talking. Like, I feel you have frustration going on in there somewhere. And I would explore it and consider the possibility that it's not even about this we're talking about. Could be something very human, something distantly in your past, your childhood, something about your life now, relationships. It could be anything, but I would look into frustration a little bit. Okay. The other thing that's a little more specific to this is, as I said, I was just giving you my instinct.
Of course.
Your process is your process, and it's intelligent. It's perfect. But it's not either or either. So perhaps just something to consider. Maybe you could actually split it up. Like, this month, I'm going to let go of everything that comes to me. When I'm meditating, I don't care how brilliant that thought sounds. It's going bye-bye. I'm going past it. I want to know what's on the other side of that veil. Next month, I'm going to honor the flow of information, the downloading of these brilliant, salient experiences and knowledges and knowings. So it doesn't have to be either or. Also,
that's a great idea. Thank you.
To consider.
Yeah, terrific.
Cool.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. It was really nice hearing from you.
Yeah.
How are we doing on time? I think we got a little time left here.
We have about 15.
Okay. We got Seymour.
Hello. I'll try to keep it brief. Have a particular question, and it sort of has come up. Megan touched on it. I'm about to go on a big road trip, and it's to a retreat, but it's going to take me like 4 or 5 days to get there. Some of your instructions on inquiry talk about driving and how there's an alertness to driving, but it's the kind of driving you do when you're actually around town looking for something, not your big cross-country road trip. So my question is, what kind of inquiry can I keep going that maintains an alertness and makes it makes all that time fruitful. That I'm behind the wheel for the next 4 or 5 days.
Mhm. Yeah, I would. What's coming to me is the exploration of physical senses. So start as you're driving with like your foot on the accelerator or gas pedal or whatever, however the terminology is, and you just feel the most distal part of your toe, or like where the shoe touches the pedal, touches your foot. Can you feel where your toe is touching the sock? Then can you feel the bottom of your foot? And just, you can just stay there. You don't have to like scan everything, constantly, but stay there in that sensation, see if it doesn't expand a little bit. Then move into the legs, and then the thighs as they're sitting in contact with the chair and the seat. Feel just those sensations, like a body scanning kind of thing. I don't know if you're going to a Vipassana retreat, but if you are, then that's good practice. But I would do like a sensory body scanning, getting really aggressive about non-dual contemplations while driving. I try not to recommend, although people tend to tell me that that's when they do it, and it can be kind of weird, but sensory, just letting your attention just drift into the senses of the body, or flow in. I say it that way because there is a way to sort of try to force it in there, which feels too much like struggle. It's more like find it in there, find the knowingness of the sensations of the feet, find the knowingness of the sensations of the hand on the steering wheel. Follow your breath, things like that. So I would work with physical sensations probably, and listen to, depending on where you are, or what you have recorded, or what you have access to, listen to some nice YouTube videos, listen to Adyashanti or whoever you like, Gangaji, or there's so many good people there that you can listen to, Eckhart Tolle, things like that, I think are actually really good practice, as well as just listening.
My idea was I was going to kind of try to keep quiet as much as possible, but
that's valuable too.
Yeah, but you think some listening time would be good?
Yeah, because that's the silence that you don't have to produce if it's a good teacher. Yeah. Adyashanti's will point you to the silence that is beyond all sound.
Well, you don't have the internet typically when you're on the road. But I do have the Audible app, and I think I've got one or two of his books on.
Mix it up. I mean, one day just do total silence.
Yeah.
One day do some body scanning sensation work. Another day listen to some, an audio book or something, and see how it goes.
Great. Thanks.
Cool. Yeah. Have a great retreat. Okay. We've got Joshua.
Holy smokes. Hey, Angelo.
Hey, Joshua.
Oh, hey.
Or Josh. Is it Josh?
I'm Josh. Please call me Josh. Thank you so much. It's a great honor and kind of amazing to me just to be present here with you. I don't even know. I sort of try, as I was sort of online here, I was like, okay, I'm not going to prepare anything. I'm just going to, I don't even, so how do I begin this and respect everybody else's time? Okay, so I listened to, I only found out about you pretty recently. And I watched a couple videos, and I've seen some stuff, and I've read your book now. I finished it last week. And I was, this whole, I heard in one of your videos, this is sort of where I was going. Okay, I'm being drawn there. You recently talked in one of those videos to me about how there may be several different kinds of cases who find their way to this. And there may be those who are, I have not experienced the entirety of my earthly life as unbroken suffering. This has been a process of decades for me, for sure. Began in my early mid-20s. I've sort of I've followed my intuition as to where to go next and to go next and to go next, and listened to fantastic teachers, and Eckhart Tolle has mattered, and Adyashanti has mattered, and all kinds of people have mattered. And I heard you recently say, I had an amazing, this is, as you can see, not organized, and I'm trying to be efficient, or at least speedy.
You're fine.
A couple of years ago, I found my way to an amazing course that had me doing a practice. It was repetitive practice, at least 20 times a day, of sort of stopping, actively trying to stop unconsciously being caught in the round of mind and just stopping over and over again, stopping and stopping and stopping. And I did that for about 8 weeks in the various ways that the teacher taught. And at the end of the 7.5 week, I had an experience that made me feel like, oh my God, I bet my life on the possibility of this awakening thing that they're talking about. And it turns out to be true. I am awake. I have awakened. Oh my God, I've awakened. And it lasted for 4.5 to 5 weeks.
Mhm.
And you used the word foretaste in the book, because after about 4.5 to 5, I mean, everything lined up. Everything was obvious and simple and open, and I knew everything. and it was like, oh, this is what I've been reading about. And the first person experience, forgive me, was very much like what I had read in every account over many years from many books, and too many
Can
books.
I ask you a couple of questions about it?
I wish you would.
Yeah. So that whatever it was you realized, right? It's not something we can talk about in words, right?
No.
Is it here right now?
It must be.
Of course, right?
Yes.
Right? Is it, could you doubt it really? Could a doubt actually change that? A thought that says, I don't know, or
No, it can't. But
right?
No, that's right.
Could I talk you out of the fact that that's the most real thing that's the most real thing that could be? Like, could I tell you that was wrong and it's going to change that one iota?
No, what ended up happening with me was that the experience of that, and I've read descriptions of the mechanism by which it appears to be lost, but isn't really.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, the way that the teacher in that course that I took, he was like, "Oh, you're fiending. You're like a junkie. You want your drugs back. And I was like, okay, I don't know. And the experience then was almost like I was dying.
Mm-hmm.
And it was terrifying. and I have a huge load of egoic involvement in wanting this awakening experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just there's a huge desire for specialness that's here, and to prove something, and to be a story, and to live up to something, and be wonderful, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And you, in this tape that I saw last week or the week before, basically said, there are some people who are in intense suffering, and they, it burns up right away, like, whoop. And then there are those of you who have an egoic involvement, and there may be things that you're doing that are keeping that fellow in place semi-permanently, and I was like, oh shit, you've just described me. This is awful. And so I just am really glad to be able to see you and say hi and bring you this entire mess in front of everybody. I'm embarrassed, but it's the truth. And my whole, I feel like this is actually, nothing is more important to me than this effort. And I don't know that I'm going about it right or at all, actually, based on secret desires to.
You're tuned right in. You're right where you're right where you should be. First of all, you're trusting your instincts that this is what's the absolutely most important thing to you. So it doesn't matter how much or how little you've suffered or what your burden is in this lifetime. Yes.
Just a quick, you have 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Okay, cool. Yeah. So it doesn't matter what your karmic burden is in the past or how things are in this life for you, as far as how much struggle none of that matters to me, because your orientation is exactly right for realization. And it's a messy process. It's a nonlinear process. You're not a mess, by the way. Like you're speaking
says you
truth. Yeah, no, what I feel is like just truth coming through you. And that's how this is. It's awesome. It's an awkward thing when we start, like, it's like a snake shedding its skin when we start to shed the old self, the old way we think about ourselves and all that. But what I really want to tell you is that you opened to something in this, thing that started and lasted 5 weeks or whatever. Okay. You opened to something there, and you know what that is. And it doesn't matter whether anyone watching this knows what that is. It doesn't matter whether anyone in the world knows what that is, or even me. What matters is that you know what it is. That is your tuning fork. You can't make more of it. You can't make less of it. You can't find it because you've never lost it. It's there for you. And it's there all the time. You can give yourself to that in whatever form. And it's going to start to come up in forms that don't look like the nothingness of it. It's going to be the everythingness of it. But I just want you to know, like, give yourself permission to give your deepest self to that, the part of yourself you can't even think about.
Oh my goodness. Thank you very much. I also, I mean, I probably I can't move into your, the house or in your garage or anything, but I just feel like, okay, like, there's a level of conversation about what's going on here, a level of detail, a level of awareness, a level of, I mean, I watched the, I watched the Wood at the Gas Pump interview too. I found it very charming, but it was just like, okay, so I don't know how this fellow seems to be able to say. It's like, wow, I mean, I was like, shoot, man, this is very, very helpful. I'm very grateful to be able to speak with you. It's a great honor to meet you this way. Thank you. I don't know what to do, but I also, by the way, I mean, I've been a daily meditator for only since like 2014, and it started out with TM, and that was fine. And more recently, you recommended a counting version of meditation that I began taking on. It was like, oh, how nice. I can, like, the thoughts don't matter. I can just go back to counting. Oh, good. The thoughts don't matter. I can just go back to counting. Oh, good. And it's a huge relief. And earthly life is becoming more painful. It's intensifying. And I don't love pain. And I'm just trying to figure out how to get incendiary as quickly as possible. If that makes any sense.
You're kind of on that steep path. It's how it is, but your heart's in it, and that's what matters.
Okay. Any recommendations happily received.
Yeah, just keep reattuning to that came forward to reveal itself to you. That's what matters. Really.
Okay.
Cool.
I'll try.
Yeah. Nice meeting you.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Okay, we're gonna take one more question on this round. That would be Dawn. Yeah, Dawn.
Hi, it's I feel very honored and privileged to be here with all of you, and especially you, Doctor. I've been on this path of awakening for decades, and I've had a few prolonged episodes of like samadhi in the distant past, and recently been returning to inquiry, which I kind of abandoned for some period of time. And my inquiry has of late been more of like the where is this? And just very recently, like yesterday and today, I'm not a very visual person, like I don't perceive things when I close my eyes visually too much, but I've been having this visualization that's like at first I thought it was scary, and then I just thought it was exciting, and then the thought of that kind of, I think, stops it, where it's kind of hard to describe. It's like it's got layers, like where I'm in layers and everything's in layers, and then it starts to crumble, and it's not like it falls apart or falls over. It's like it literally is like twisting and untwisting and crumbling. And I am part of all of that, and then I'm like waiting to like, okay, now where did I go, or where, and there's just nothing. It just stops. And I think it's because my mind comes in and is looking for that answer to the other end of the cliff, like, okay, I've jumped off the cliff now, or I've allowed myself to be disassembled, and it just stops. The other part of my question, which is kind of unrelated, maybe it's related, is that I'm having an easy enough time interacting with people that I need to, like on a daily basis, at like in my job or my husband or whatever, but I'm not really finding myself seeking or wanting the pleasure of company of, I'm finding most relationships really superficial and trapped in either the past or the future conversations. And I don't really, it's not annoying, it's just I have no way to even want to connect to that. So it's not really that friendships are falling away, it's just that I don't feel that pull towards that.
Yeah. Well, I can answer the second part first very easily, because that's pretty common. It's typical. We lose interest in, I think I mentioned earlier today at some point that some of the mind identification that keeps itself going through social interactions, through social rules of engagement and so forth. And this is exactly that. At some point you realize, oh, wow, this is a conversation or relationship based on who knows what, gossip or the past and the future, or things that just don't deeply resonate with you anymore. And I think most, if not everyone, kind of goes through that to some degree, and recognizing that it's just part of the process. It's okay. Another thing that tends to fall away that's sort of along those lines actually is we often lose interest in like stories, even books. We might have used to be really interested in literature or story-based or novel-based, fiction-based novels or movies or TV shows. And at some point, it just gets hard to follow. It's like, there's just no juice to it anymore. There's no interest in that. And that's not uncommon at all. As far as the first thing you started talking about, you know, what I wanted to say is like, yeah, just totally let that happen. The questions that will anchor you, that the mind will try to use to anchor you, will be exactly like, well, where am I going to go then? Or what's next? Or what is, you know, or even what is this? How do I categorize this experience? And you, I'm sure, know that obviously the answer to all those questions is don't even ask. Don't worry about it when this is occurring. The other thing I wanted to say to you is consider the possibility or probability that the mental, as you said, it's like a mental image, which you don't usually have. Maybe you don't have mental images, or you have very vague mental images, which is not that uncommon, actually, we're finding out. But that this is, your mind might have an interpretation through its own language for what's happening, but it's actually not what's primarily happening. And what's primarily happening is a far more profound and fundamental movement, which is exactly what I felt when you were describing it. So what I am inclined to say is you can definitely trust it. And as that unwinding happens, whatever it is happens, if it happens again, if it comes back into your experience, just be a little bit alert for the thoughts that say, well, what's going to happen to me? Where am I going to go? You know, there might be some underlying fear, and just be willing, just really give yourself to it and say, I am willing to feel whatever I have to feel to let go completely here. You can carry that intention off to sleep if it feels relevant to you, off to sleep at night, whenever that opens back up, I'm willing to go wherever that goes. Because the way you described it to me makes me really trust it. It feels like a very good direction to go. I've had many conversations with people along these lines. People will say, I've had this experience, a portal opened, or, you know, this, and they'll describe something that I can totally feel what they're talking about. And then occasionally someone will say, and I've had teachers tell me, no, that's not what you're interested in. You know, move your attention this way or use this kind of technique. But their instinct is they're actually curious about it. They just don't know. And I always say, go there, let it take you. And many people have gotten back saying, okay, I don't know why I didn't think of that exactly, or I didn't give myself full permission. But thank you for doing it. And so again, this comes upon people in such different ways. It's, as you know, it's an indescribable experience, and it's not even an experience. It's too fundamental to be called an experience. So the ways we describe it are so varied, but your instinct to trust it is good. And I would say, really give yourself to that. Does that resonate?
It really does. And I really needed that permission, I guess. So
you might be really, really surprised where it goes.
I have a feeling.
Yeah. And like I said, you don't need to reproduce it with the mind or anything. When these openings start happening, they kind of start happening in different ways. They start happening everywhere. They start happening at any time. So again, if you just carry that, it's like the feminine aspect, just carry that openness and intention to allow these profound, deep transformations to just come forward, and they will.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it was nice meeting you.
Good to meet you.
Okay. Yeah. So we got to most questions. What we'll do is tomorrow we will try to reconstruct this list. If you guys can kind of remember what order you were in, when we get to Q&A tomorrow, we'll try to do those first.
Well, Angela, there's only 4, so I could just make a list.
Okay, that's cool. Or is there 4 or 5? Okay. Yep, that would be awesome. Okay, everyone, thank you
okay, I
so
got
much for your participation and wonderful questions. And I'm just looking at what comes next. So we have dinner break. So we have an offline meditation at 7 p.m., 1900. Poetry at 1940. So bring anything you want to read. And we'll just do, again, like when we open the round, we'll just do raise of hands, and then we can just go through however y'all want to read whatever you want to read. So, okay, I'll get this uploaded, and I'll put the link in the Google Doc, and it will be, it'll remain unpublished. So you have to have the link to see it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you, man.
Yeah, you're welcome, guys. I'm going to close this meeting just so you know, because that's the only way it'll let me to get the recording. And then I'll reopen it very shortly after.
Thanks, Angelo.
Mm-hmm.